Before the sound, there was a story. Before the rhythm, there was a memory. From Africa to the diaspora, our music carries us. You are listening to the KettyJackline Music Foundation podcast, where Pan-African art music professionals gather to share their stories.
KettyJackline.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel. I'm the founder of KettyJackline, and this is, I believe, this is episode 3, 2. I've just been doing a lot. I don't even know. This is episode something in season 2, and we're focusing heavily on languages for this. And I'm joined today by Ketty. Ketty, could you please
Yes.
introduce yourself, your background, where are you joining us from this call?
All right. My name is KettyJackline. I also go by Maina, especially the people who know my surname, Maina. I am a composer in Kenya, and my interest is fusing Indigenous music and Indigenous traditions from my community. I am half Meru, that's an ethnic group in Kenya, and half Kikuyu, another ethnic group in Kenya. So when I compose, I incorporate those aspects in my work, and I also incorporate Swahili, which is the official language spoken in Kenya. Apart from that, I fuse that with Western classical music and sometimes some popular music or popular styles that I've grown up listening to. So in Kenya, some of these popular styles are called zilizopendwa. So if you listen to like a lot of rumba, Congolese music, and a lot of some indigenous or composers and musicians who fused indigenous music and popular styles from the rest of the world during the 70s, 60s, we call that zilizopendwa. So that has influenced me a lot, sometimes unconsciously and consciously. So I fuse all that in my work.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I feel like as I've been talking to people from different parts of Africa, I realized that man, certain things are hard to pronounce. But I took notes. You said Meru and Kiku, right?
Kikuyu.
Kikuyu.
Yes,
Okay.
Kikuyu.
Could you kind of share more about that background and how it connects to your identity as a composer? This is my first time hearing of those two, and these are ethnic groups, if I'm correct, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. Okay. So for the Meru part of it, that's from my mother's background, and her family were musicians or a family of musicians, so to speak, both traditional dancers. So my great grandmother, grandmother were traditional dancers. So they will teach us some of those music like that. And I grew up listening to my mother also singing to me Meru music. Even though I grew up half of my life in Meru and most of my life in the Kikuyu part of Kenya. So when I was in Meru, that's when my mother would teach me all that. And when we also came back to the Kikuyu side of it, we kept on speaking actually Kimeru. So in our house, we actually speak Kimeru, which is interesting. So she would sing. I remember any time that we were to pray, because she is a Christian, she wanted us to sing this song, which is traditional from Meru community. It's called Kerarere. Kerarere was traditionally performed by actually men. So she would sing this. Turia maruorombe, komenga goi marombe, turia maruorombe. Turia maruorombe, komenga goi maromba. Turia maruorombe. So that is an example of kerarere. That is a style, an indigenous style from the Meru community. And so anytime she would sing that, and then we would come and we know, oh, it's time to pray, so let's come back. So even though we grew up in a Christian background, we still interacted a lot with indigenous culture severally. So that was the Kikuyu one. And for that was the Meru one, sorry. For the Kikuyu one now, I grew up in like the rest of my life in Kikuyu. So a place called Nyahururu. So when I was in Meru, I grew up in Tigania and Nkobo. And then in Kikuyu land is Nyahururu. So when I was growing up in Nyahururu, of course, I interacted with a lot of Kikuyu music. And the radio station that now this is my father's side, he would play Kikuyu music and Kikuyu radio stations. And Kikuyu radio stations are known to play Kikuyu music. An example is a musician called Kamaro who actually sang Indigenous Kikuyu music. So he will sing a song like uh go go we'll sing song go go ne kwawe oh haya go go ne kwawe tamania. So that is an example of Kikuyu music that we grew up singing as children and we would listen to in on the radio and so on and so forth. So I have grown up with this hybridity inside of me, Meru, Kikuyu,
Mm.
and Swahili. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. When I heard you singing it sounded as if there's a call and response. Would you say that's the case,
Yes.
or because I know like with like Yoruba, for example, maybe it's because it's Christian, maybe it's not even language. I know there's a lot of call and response where it's very easy to pick up. Is that the case for all, or do you think there are other types of structure for the pieces you would sing in Meru or Kikuyu?
So most of them were call and response because they were performed in ceremonies, a lot
Mm,
of them. So if I start with the example that I gave before, the Turia Maru Romba Nkomenga we Maromba, the Meru example. So if the call is singing or the soloist is singing Turia Maru Romba Nkomenga we Maromba, then the response just says ha like that. Then Turia Maru Romba. Ah, Turia Marorombe, like that. So call and response. Same with the Kikuyu song of Go Kone Kwawe. Then they respond, oh, haya, go kone kwawe tamania. Then the response is Tajao ya bogo. So those are a few. Most of them were call and response, considering that most were performed when people are in a group, whether it's traditional work songs or traditional ceremonies or traditional rituals like that. Most of the songs I personally interacted with were like that. But that doesn't mean that there weren't like solo pieces. For example, the ones that accompanied some I think storytelling functions. I don't exactly remember one song that I think my great grandmother would sing. I it escapes my mind, but it had a solo aspect to it.
mm,
Yeah.
That's yeah. I've seen that. Like perhaps like in the church setting, there'll be someone singing a solo, but the choir or the audience, it's very accessible through a call and response. So it seems like that's been a common thread for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of African languages. Um, but yeah, in regard to the piece that you wrote, I spent some time looking at the program notes. It looks like it's a translation of, I believe, "My Lord, My Shepherd" from Psalm
Yes.
20. Could you pronounce it in Swahili so I don't get canceled? I'm gonna get canceled.
Bwana mchungaji wangu.
Okay, I'm gonna let you say that. I'm not gonna say that this whole episode. Wait, is say the first word again, please?
Bwana,
Is that Lord in Swahili?
Lord.
Oh,
Yes,
that's
that
interesting.
is Lord.
Yeah,
Yes.
when I hear languages have such interesting nuances. For example,
Mm-hmm.
someone could say my lord, but then in Yoruba in Nigeria, my lord would be Oluwami. But when
Mm-hmm.
you say it, it has its own unique nuance to it. I can't
Mm-hmm.
describe it, but it's very distinct in its sound. Um, as you wrote it, because you mentioned there's Meru, Kikuyu, and Swahili. Is Swahili the language that you felt could capture what you wanted, or if this was translated to perhaps Meru or another language, right? How do you think it could change the overall vision of what you wanted for the piece?
Uh-huh. Okay, so this specific piece was Swahili, and I wanted to capture the Swahili language for it. If I had composed it in Meru and or Kikuyu, it would be totally different.
Mm.
Because in Swahili, this specific piece was inspired by mass or the Kenyan Swahili mass, as I mentioned in the program notes. So when we were singing, there are several mass songs that we sing that are inspired by Tanzanian Swahili
Yeah.
and sometimes Kenyan Swahili. And I wanted to capture how I grew up in the church context, like in the mass, Swahili mass context, through Bwana ni mchungaji wangu. So there was, if I was to compose in Kikuyu, Kikuyu would have been Mwathani ni mureithi wakwa. Like even the intonation changes. Mwathani ni murithi wakwa. And Bwana ni mchungaji wangu. As you can hear, there's two different intonations.
Hmm.
And if it was in Kimeru, then it would have been Mwathani we murithi okwa, another totally different way of pronouncing it. So definitely the composition would have changed. If I was composing Mwathani niwe mureithi okwa, then I would have to follow that phrasing and that contour da 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 da, rather than Bwana ndiye mchungaji wangu, which is Swahili. So
Yeah.
it would have been totally different. It will not have made sense even with the melody that I composed for that particular piece for
Yeah.
these two languages. So it was different. So when I was composing that piece, I was in that space of Swahili mass, including my choice of instrumentation, the marimba. So at this point, I didn't want to include the piano or the keyboard, which is actually commonly used in church in the Swahili mass. But I wanted to capture a combination of the piano and the drums, but mostly that drum, because most Swahili masses have this rhythm when they're drumming, like that.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to capture that aspect, and then my choice of the cello and double bass, it's because most Swahili songs, and if you listen to a lot of Swahili Catholic songs, they emphasize a lot on the male vocal parts, like the bass and the tenor. So
Mm.
I wanted to capture that kind of to give the male timbre, to emphasize on that timbre a lot, and that's why I chose that instrumentation altogether to capture all that. And now when I was composing the melody, I followed that contour, that melodic contour of Bwana ndiye mchungaji wangu, and this wherever in Swahili we stress on the penultimate syllable, like the syllable, the second last syllable in
Yeah.
most words. So Bwana ndiye mchungaji wangu. So I wanted to emphasize Bwana ndiye like that.
Mm.
So that's why I chose that specific melody because it emphasized on that main syllable like that.
Well,
Yeah.
that's deep. That's like it's really
Yeah.
interesting hearing because again, we have the program notes, but there's certain
Yeah.
contexts that you just said that are just not in the program
Yeah.
notes. And I think you give good grounding and context for why it's written in Swahili, because it seems as
Hmm.
though it's not just the usage of the language, but the context in which it provides for the listener.
Hmm.
Yeah, the instrumentation is very unique. I haven't
Hmm.
seen. It's not common. It's very mixed chamber like I would say, and
Hmm.
it's interesting too in regards to the usage of language because I think sometimes
Hmm.
when I think about language and how it involves in composition, sometimes I'm thinking about it from the singer perspective, but I think
Hmm.
that you also do a really nice job of providing context with the instruments, because marimba, double bass, cello,
Hmm.
it's not a voice, right? But it
Yeah.
plays a role in conveying the language, or
Yeah.
like the context of it. So
Yeah, that is interesting because for me, I also think about language in its diversity, if I may say that.
Yeah,
Both the speech and instrumentation and the dance and the symbols and everything. So
yeah.
if composing, let's say like Bwana ndiye mchungaji wangu, I was thinking about how we would also sing in church. Let's say that call and response because we have the responsorial psalm and the person who is reading that specific part
Mm,
of the mass will say, Bwana ndiye mchungaji wangu, sitapungukiwa kitu. And then the entire congregation responds, Bwana ndiye mchungaji wangu, sitapungukiwa kitu. So that was the introduction of the first part of the melody where we have the soloist. So the solo and chorus
yeah.
aspect of that piece, it's because of the responsorial inspiration.
And then again, you keep saying the Swahili very
Yeah.
easily, but have you had to, teach somebody who was not familiar with the language how to? Because I'm looking at the phonetic translation you have, but I also realize, like, for the tonality, right? Is it,
Mhm.
for example, I know Yoruba is three tones, low, middle, high. What is that the
Mhm.
same for Swahili or is it different?
It's almost the same, but then in Swahili, it also depends with the dialect. So, uh, for this specific translation, the dialect, of course, was inspired by how we speak usually. Bwana ndiye mchungaji wangu, sitapungukiwa kitu. And then there is this dialect from the coastal of Kenya, which would change also my genre. If I was composing in the coastal Swahili, if I may say, I would have composed a Tarab inspired piece or Chakacha. So Tarab, which is almost similar to Egyptian Tarab if you listen to it. But now because Tarab inspired so a lot of coastal Swahili music, then my if I'm using that dialect, then my genre of music would change to Tarab and Swahili like that. So now for this particular piece, if I was to teach, because I have taught a non-Swahili speaker how to pronounce, the good thing about Swahili is you pronounce it as you see it. Um, it doesn't, it's not like, let's say English, the English language where you find someone says pronunciation or pronunciation and you write it differently, or you say a knife and has a K in front of it.
Mm.
So the Swahili is easy because this if you see B and A and B and A, the same way you say ba, it doesn't change because we use the vowels a, e, I, o, u.
Okay.
So a and b is ba. And the next one is ba. So baba. If it's bwana, we have the b and w, boa and na. So that's the good thing about Swahili. It's the same, the words as you look at them are pronounced the same way.
Oh, oh, okay. I'm gonna try and pronounce the opening and let me know
Mhm.
on a scale of 1 to 10 how if I should just
Okay.
either I'll get canceled, this podcast will shut down, or we'll move forward. Because
It will
okay,
be okay.
Bwana ndi ye mchungaji wangu sita pun gu ki wana kitu.
Yes.
They should give me my visa. Just give me my visa. Okay.
Good, good
Okay.
job. So it's like that. Now with more confidence. So Bwana, you just say Bwana
Well,
ndiye.
I'm saying it, but also when you say I hear a tonality, right? I hear almost a rise, and so
Yes.
I think that's the missing piece that can be lost in the phonetic translation. 'Cause I'm
Mm.
saying buana, but you're saying buana. This,
Uh,
yeah, you just got a little more oomph to it.
Uh-huh. I think that's the sad thing about translation. Even though it allows a non-Swahili speaker to speak the language, but some of the intonation is lost in translation.
Mm,
That's usually sad about it. But at least with our recording. And thank God for technology,
yeah,
because it would have been complicated now giving someone a piece in the 80s and sending that piece and telling them to sing without any any recording or any guidance. Yeah,
yeah.
but the
I,
good thing, uh-huh.
well, are you familiar with IPAs?
Not really.
Oh,
Could you elaborate?
they're the International Phonetic Association. So I know certain languages have IPAs, but in speaking to different composers, I, yeah, it's very true. Things get lost in the translation. I would say IPAs, it seems as though they're used as a way to communicate. They're not the most authentic representation, but it's a way
Mhm.
to give context. But now to have further context, it's not an IPA. It's going to be in audio. You have to like listen. So
Mm.
yeah,
Mm. Oh yeah, because they can the intonation also changes depending on someone's emotion or someone's expression.
yeah,
Uh, and that is also lost in translation because
mm,
it was just telling someone, oh, like, do you know that the Lord is my shepherd? Then unajua Bwana ni mchungaji wangu. Like that is the intonation. But now if I'm telling someone like I know that the Lord is my shepherd, najua Bwana ni mchungaji wangu. So the intonation also changes in those circumstances. So expression, so translation, a lot is lost in translation when you think
yeah.
about it. Uh, so I think it just needs an audio so that someone can literally hear what the person was expressing.
No, definitely.
Audio.
I know even when we engrave some of the past pieces that we've done, one issue is it's very hard to find Africans who understand engraving. When we did our
Mm-hmm.
first engraving, it was just really hard. And this year we're hoping to do like this engraving workshop series. But essentially, one thing that's tricky is
Mm-hmm.
engraving indigenous African instruments and also
Mm-hmm.
um depending on the language, just languages in Africa. Because for indigenous African instruments, definitely these instruments were not notated. So trying to notate for djembe or talking drum, you can
Mm-hmm.
put something on paper, but it's definitely lost. Something is lost. And the same thing
Mm-hmm.
for um like I'm guessing Swahili or potentially Meru. Someone could translate and put the text, but depending on the tonality, it could
Mm-hmm.
be so the form of Western notation makes it tricky to
Mm-hmm.
really communicate, especially for a performer who may not be of that culture. But I think the audio, doing the field work, can give you the
Mm-hmm.
context to perform it authentically.
Mm. Yeah, that is so true. I think that's why we are all encouraged to go to the field and listen, not just compose
Yeah.
out of what someone thinks, but literally just go to the field, then listen, interact with a lot of musicians, and then to understand how that works. I think you've given a good example of instrumentation and how it also changes and it's how it is hard to, notate some things and some things are lost.
Oh yeah.
And also language, a lot of things are lost. Like, I remember when I was trying to compose a piece in Kikuyu, but then I know Kikuyu language or Kikuyu singing is in between. It's not, it has a lot of microtones in between. So if I'm singing traditionally in Kikuyu, people will say Kikuyu music is pentatonic, like that. It is known that it is pentatonic. But then when you actually listen to the music, it has some microtones. The do might not exactly be do, but in between do or like that. So it's hard now to notate all that, and you just notate it, and the instruments will play so perfectly, the right pitch. But then in a Kikuyu person's ear, they'll be like, no, something is missing. It's not
Yeah.
supposed to be that perfect like that.
No,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think again with those kind of instruments or language, at times it's just best done in a very oral way. I remember
Mhm.
there was an Igbo folk song I saw that a friend of mine performed at his recital. And when I asked him about the IPA, he said it's not of much use. And he just worked with the choir. And because he understood
Mhm.
the language, he could teach them very well and provide all the context needed. But if there was no one, I think that's where representation matters. If there's no one in
Mhm.
that room that really understands the culture, the language, no matter how much expertise you have in conducting or whatever,
Mhm.
something's missing. So
Ah.
yeah, it makes it tricky because I think Pan
Mhm.
African art music is something we want to make more global and accessible, but also
Mhm.
there's a level of due diligence that I think people don't realize.
Mhm.
You can't just necessarily pick up the score and just get to work.
Yeah.
You may need to sit
Yeah.
down, go eat some Kenyan food,
Yeah.
go find someone who's like, you may need to do just again the field work to really
Mhm.
understand. Because again, I do think if you have because even what are some dishes that are popular in Kenya?
Nyama choma and ugali. Ugali, nyama choma, that is one of the most popular dishes.
Yama,
So, nyama choma,
yama.
barbecued meat, nyama choma. So,
Let me,
nyama, Nyama,
mm.
nyama. And then choma, Choma.
See, I just looked up a picture. I think if I had a couple of this, I would sing a little better. I would really
Yeah.
understand. Yeah, this looks good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very nice. And then you add some kachumbari on the side
yeah.
with chili. That's the best meal.
When I
That's one of the best
when
meals
when I
in
say do
Kenya.
when I say do field work, this is what I mean. This is field work.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some who go to, learn traditional music, you also engage in the traditional brew of depending on the place or the ethnic group where you are. So, for instance, Kikuyu has Moratina as a traditional brew. That is beer made of sugarcane. Like
Mm.
that is Kikuyu. Yeah, if you go to Kalenjin, they have buttermilk, but they call it mursik. So they will give you mursik for the Kalenjin community. And you go to different places. Meru, also Muratina. They also have Muratina. Different ethnic groups have different brews,
Okay.
which is interesting.
I'm just
Mm.
taking notes. So when I start my field work in Kenya, I'll know where the good food is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and of course, the more you travel, the more you also go to a lot of concerts and Kenyan shows. They're interesting, very interesting.
Mm.
Yeah,
Well,
and
I I kind of want to flip the script really quickly because I'm really
mhm.
curious to know. We've kind of talked about languages you're familiar with, and then
Yes.
maybe languages for someone who maybe is from like the U.S. or the Western world that are not familiar. But as someone who is Kenyan, interacting with languages based in Kenya,
Hmm.
have you ever interacted with languages in other parts of Africa, either in an educational way or in a way to potentially utilize? For example, I'm curious to understand what African composers their relationship to other African languages outside of the other
Mm.
country. What's been
Okay.
what's been your experience with that?
Actually, I have listened and interacted with a lot of, I would say, South African music, Zulu and
I'm a piano.
Kosa. No,
Or is it
oh
okay?
yeah, even Amapiano is also is
Okay.
also an example. Of course, I've listened to some Amapiano.
Yeah.
But for art music, interestingly enough, last year at the annual Kenya Music Festival, one of the soprano pieces was from a South Africa, was from South Africa. So I think a lot of Kenyan choirs sing a couple of South African music.
Mm,
That is one thing. And then sometimes I tried Yoruba, but it was hard. Like it was I just looked at the pronunciation and first gave up Yoruba and Igbo first and said I'll come back to that later.
huh.
Uh yeah, I just saw that when you listen to the music, it sounds so nice. And then when you try singing that, yeah, it was a bit
Yeah.
difficult. But for the South African music, a lot of Kenyans have interacted with it and sang in choirs and played the music. Yeah.
You
I
said
think
you said closer to, right?
yes.
So because closer is the one with the clicking sound.
Yes.
So
Yes.
when you approach learning that, who because I mean my if I speak closer, I'll ever this podcast will get canceled. Everything will get canceled. But closer to me is one of the hardest languages because of just the rhythmic nature and also the language. It's too. It feels like I'm learning. I'm being a singer and a percussionist at the same time. So
Mm.
how did y'all approach learning Kosa?
So a lot of YouTube videos, of
Mm.
course, and practicing. I also have some Kosa friends who are helping me out in pronouncing some of these words,
Yeah,
especially the clicks, because they are different. There are three types of clicks. I haven't, I haven't gotten the two, the with. There's one that you place your tongue as if you are on top of your what is it called? Just yeah, somewhere here on top,
yeah.
and you click it. Then there is of course the usual the Okosa kind of click. So I'm learning a lot from them. And when we are singing in choirs, we listen to a lot of their YouTube videos. That has
Mm.
helped a lot of choirs to sing that. I think also it's because the influence of South African music has been in Kenya for a couple of times with Miriam Makeba and Yvonne Chaka Chaka and like all those Zilizo Pendwa. A lot of Kenyan musicians would listen to that growing up. And from there, so even the choirs now started listening to South African choir music
Yeah.
and all that. So South Africa is one of the, I think, countries that has influenced a lot of Kenyan music, if I may put it that way. And of course, Congolese. So just that influence. That's why choirs will have a lot of South African music.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good to know. It's always nice seeing that. I guess you would call it interdialogue between other African countries to see,
Mm,
because it's interesting. I know, like in Nigeria, like seeing an ensemble singing a piece that's Kenyan or a
mhm,
piece that's from South Africa. It's you get to hear. It's almost like, for example, like there are people who are maybe Igbo, but they have a
mhm,
Yoruba accent, and it kind of depends on where you live. And it's interesting, like
mhm.
hearing perhaps the Yoruba accent with sung in Swahili. Because I know, like for example, just the way Nigerians are, even if when we try and speak English, the
Mhm.
way we speak English, even as Africans, there's a context to it that
Yeah.
I can't describe it. It's just they they don't talk like how someone maybe from the US will talk.
Yeah.
The way they say regular words, it just has this very commanding presence to it. I don't know how to describe it. So, but yeah, that's good to know. And
Mhm,
I'm curious also with like, especially like Central Africa. I feel like the
mhm,
times when we talk about languages, Um, it's been either West Africa or South Africa. Um,
Mm.
I'm definitely trying to find composers who are more based in central and also the northern parts, to just have more understanding of what goes on in terms of their music method too.
Because I think for me, I would listen to an East African composer that is Tamusuza,
Mm. Yeah.
Justinian Tamusuza. I think I love the way he approached Ugandan music, Bagandan music, and then translated that to Western instrument. That was quite interesting. So he is one of the composers whose music I listen to quite a lot. That is Justinian Tamusuza. And there was this Kenyan composer, this Kenyan professor called Njora, Njoora. So he composed Kikuyu music and he arranged a lot of that on piano. So some
Mm.
like the African piano, Akinuba's African pianism concept. So he approached that on his piano work,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting. So I think those are some of the musicians I would say composers that I listen to in Kenya and Uganda. Yeah.
Mm. You mentioned Tom Souza. I also just put this in the chat for you. I don't know if did you attend our African Virtual Masterclass series?
Yeah, I think I attended two.
Yeah,
There
but
was
I put the playlist. So we have a series of, I believe, 9 composers from different parts of Africa speaking
Mhm.
about their compositional approach in regards to like their culture. So outside of the two you attended, I would recommend checking out some of the other composers, because it's essentially like a master class of their composition. It's really cool. It's free 99, so you don't like, they may be YouTube ads, but I didn't put them there. Someone else did.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah.
It's not your fault for YouTube ads.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was interesting. Actually, when I was attending the two, it was the time that I got like time throughout my schedule because I was a little busy at that time. I wanted to attend all, but
Mm.
then I only found the two. But that was quite interesting, hearing how people compose or hearing how people approach composition. And I like that some of this actually kind of also influenced me because I remember there was that that class on composing, actually using language to compose or how language actually influences composition. I think that was Grace. It was Grace.
I think
I don't want
Grace
to
Oforta.
yes,
Yeah.
I won't pronounce that. I might.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was interesting seeing how also language influences her instrumental works and her instrumental composition. That that was an amazing class, or that was an amazing workshop, and we got to do some practical. We had a practical part of it, and try to also compose and come up with just something small. So,
Yeah.
so this masterclass series was quite interesting. Of course, I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. The next one is focusing on engraving, which is in the
Mm-hmm.
fall. Because I think a lot of composers, we could do more to support them when engraving, because some people, types of people will make it work right, but because they
Mm-hmm.
don't engrave it or have the resources, because engraving does cost
Mm-hmm.
some level of money. And if there was someone who could do it within the African context and charge within, the African currency system, it would
Mm-hmm.
benefit composers, because some people will like compose pieces, but they may not provide context. So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about with
Yeah.
notation or stuff, that's a part of the engraving process, and knowing how do you communicate these things in a way that makes it accessible.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely please share this link. For this podcast, the sheet music, the virtual
Mm-hmm.
masterclass, the long-term goal is, I remember when I first started a coaching part, and one of the composers I was interviewing who was in Nigeria at the time. He was saying how it was hard for him to access works by African composers. And I'm like, that's crazy.
Mm,
Because, as Africans are developing within this scene, I want them to have resources to. So, like this conversation we're having, maybe a young
mhm,
composer will learn. So, my goal is, Africans have African resources, whether it's the sheet
mm,
music, these podcasts, this virtual masterclass. So that way, as they're growing as a composer, they can never
mm.
say, "Oh, I only had Western music to study." No, 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 because then it messes with their framework, and now they have to go and
Yeah.
do like I want this to be a space where hopefully we can provide field work. So maybe if you can't travel to
Mhm,
Kenya, right, you have
mhm,
you can do field work, so you feel like you are more comfortable in your identity as a composer who's trying to convey Pan African art music.
mhm. Ah, yes, that is quite interesting. Actually, when I found the publishing link, I found it interesting because I looked at the African composers who have published there, and I said, "Oh my God, this is what we didn't have access to before." And of course, as you said, we listen to a lot of Western music, and our education is analyze, Beethoven, sonata, or
Yeah.
Mozart thing. And someone might not exactly, the music does not speak to the person exactly because they've grown up with something completely different. I remember I was talking to someone about my first experience with learning about cadences, and someone talked about an amen cadence. And trust me, the plague god cadence was not the first thing that came to mind when I heard about amen cadence, because in when we sing in church, and a lot of Kikuyu churches, when they sing, let's say, let me give an example of a Kikuyu song, like, and then when we are done, we just say, Amen.
Mhm.
And someone else can speak. So when we were learning about cadences and I heard that, I was like, no, this doesn't make sense. I have I have never had any church ending their music like that.
Mm.
So it was interesting now when later on I was now learning about, different music and being introduced to ethnomusicology and African musicology, and learning how, different Africans have different cultures, or every African ethnic group has, their culture is different and unique in its own way. And we appreciate every culture in its space like that. So that was quite interesting for me. And that's why when I want to compose in this language, I will also go to the people who I know who speak the language or who sing in that language
Yeah.
and compose in that language, because it's quite interesting
No, definitely.
seeing how they yeah.
And actually, I think because right now because we're growing our catalog. Currently, our catalog is Yoruba Efik, which is a
Mm-hmm.
language spoken in Cross River State in Nigeria, Igbo,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then I think you might be the first Swahili piece we have on our platform. But
Oh,
but also we're gonna have other languages.
yeah.
But our goal is again like truly like I hope that whether you're African, you're from the diaspora, and anyone, I hope this is a space where you can study these composers' works. So that way,
Mm-hmm.
as we're cultivating like that next generation, you can look at these works because again, the nice thing about these works too, they all had to go through a process. So your pieces go to our platform, but some people we said no to because we had a editorial board review all the pieces to help us kind of
Mm-hmm.
make sure we put pieces that we feel are quality. So
Mm-hmm.
the editorial board like they gave a thumbs up for your piece. So it's nice also to have like that feedback from other scholars saying
Mm-hmm.
this piece is quality. Because I remember in the past, right, we've had some people who make works that they'll say it's African art music, and we listen to it, and I'm like, this just sounds like a Bach fugue. The only thing African about
Mm-hmm.
this is the fact that your name is Babatunde. That's it. Everything else, there's nothing African about this piece. So
Yeah.
yeah, but
Uh,
yeah.
that is interesting, and thank you for accepting the piece, because it was also interesting. Also sharing with you that particular piece, it was like sharing my Kenya Catholic Swahili mass experience from, growing up and sharing it out to the world, because I would love to hear also more people perform it and more people interacting with the piece. Um, just sharing Swahili music. Yeah, so it was quite interesting and I appreciated that. Yeah, because the entire composition process has been quite as well interesting. As I said before, both consciously and unconsciously, I am influenced by a lot of things that happen or a lot of experiences from my
Mm.
background. Yeah, so that piece has that. So sometimes I might even compose a Swahili piece and put some Kikuyu things inside unconsciously, just because I have grown up listening to Kikuyu music and vice versa. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's interesting also listening and getting the feedback and sharing the music out there. Yeah.
No, yeah, definitely. And again, I think maybe someone who is Nigerian, right? They may hear this piece and they still convey maybe in Yoruba, right? But this piece influences them in some way, or maybe for you. So yeah, it's a long-term goal, but I'm excited about it because I think it'll like make sense, both now, but also I think even more in the future.
In
Yeah.
future.
But
Yes.
I think I just have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in regards to how do I'm trying to put my thoughts to words, but I guess in regards to collaboration within African
Mm-hmm.
Pan-African art music and the
Mm-hmm.
usage of language, I guess as a composer, where do you see language in regards because for example globally right now I
Mm-hmm.
think especially within the Western world I've seen a lot of like atonal when we talk about
Mm-hmm.
I think in the beginning there was like Gregorian chants and there's
Mm-hmm.
like maybe like the Romantic era classical but in this day and age I see a lot of atonal music and as someone
Mm-hmm.
who grew up loving classical music I'm not loving it that much anymore. The atonal music is not. I don't know. It's at times I'm like, dang, maybe this music is above me. But
Uh-huh.
for me, I see language as very important, both for singers and instrumentalists. But for you're a
Mm-hmm.
composer. I'm not a composer. I'm more just a listener. But
Yeah.
where do you see language playing a role in terms of like music or I don't want to should I say classical Pan-African music,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
as we go into the future. Because again, we want to cultivate new listeners. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess how can we use language to perhaps cultivate new listeners within
Mm-hmm.
this art form?
I think something I've learned all through. I had a performance. Actually, this performance taught me a lot. Where I sang in Kimeru and Kiswahili, and then someone else sang in Hindu like that.
Okay.
So it was an very interesting performance. So combining all those cultures together, and then the instrumentalists were from a jazz background.
Mm,
So collaborating gave me also new approaches or new ideas on how to approach language. So when you collaborate with more musicians, you also get more elements and more, melodic contours, melodic ideas and rhythmic ideas to play with. So for for the music to get to a larger audience as well, it's good to collaborate with those musicians and composers because there are so many interesting approaches that as a composer you might not have thought about it, but someone who, let's say, has grown up like listening to Hindu music or practicing Hindu music has a different approach to composing, and they will bring something unique to your composition or to your field. Someone who is jazz or trained in jazz and someone who is classically trained, when they collaborate, that's something unique, arises from that collaboration. So
Mhm.
that's one thing I learned from this performance. It was an interesting, I enjoyed, collaborating with these amazing musicians, and we created something nice that we want to record. Yeah, hopefully so that it can be out there. But it was an interesting creative experience performing Meru and then Hindu and Swahili all together in one large piece. Yeah, it was quite amazing. So collaboration is crucial for
Yeah.
a composer.
No,
Yeah.
I think that's true. It almost if you know I think the song "We Are the World." I'm like
Mm.
almost like if I get enough composers from all parts of the diaspora together, like someone could compose that next "We Are the World." Like not literally "We Are the World," but like that level of collaboration where it's a bunch of great artists coming together and you hear
Hmm.
the product of just collaboration at its finest. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm hoping one day when I have a lot of money, I can just bring people to because collaboration I've also realized is very expensive, and it seems like it would be great if there was some form, right, where composers met in perhaps a host country, right?
Hmm.
But again, collaboration is important, but at times it can be very expensive.
Yeah, yeah, very true. I also hope that one day in future we can all meet and share, as composers as well, and have or compose that We Are the World in,
Yeah,
a large We Are the World symphony, just
yeah.
because we are the world, we are actually the world. Africa has so much to offer, from north, central, east. Yeah, the funny thing is, even in Kenya, just one country, you'll find different ethnic groups and you'll find different music genres all together, just from one country. So imagine having all these other composers from different countries who have experienced these different cultures. How wonderful would that be?
No,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And again, I think that's the purpose of the podcast. While we are promoting Pan-African art music, each conversation we have kind of gives a better nuance because
Mhm.
the diaspora is so big. And maybe I will never speak to every single culture or ethnic group, but I will speak to maybe 1,000 or so. And then someone else can finish it in their lifetime. But definitely just trying to bring more awareness to, because again, I have never heard about Meru or Kikuyu. So
Kikuyu.
see, I'm gonna get canceled. I'm gonna get canceled. It's so many. You say it so elegantly, but it's a lot of. I feel like as you talk, I wish I could put a subtitle so I can see it because I see the subtitles. But it's nice like being able to talk to people and just kind of hone in as opposed to Kenya, right? This conversation we honed in on things that are very specific,
Mm.
and it kind of brought more attention to that. Swahili is pretty well known, I would say, but the other two, it's my first time.
Mhm.
My first time. So I apologize, but I'm enlightened. I'm enlightened now.
I'm happy to have introduced that to you.
Yeah.
And there are more cultures and more ethnic groups that hopefully you also get to hear about them from
Yeah.
Kenya. Yeah.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I did make a note. I think the dish you said is nyama. Nyama.
Nyama choma.
I do remember that word. That'll be my field work whenever I'm in Kenya. So
Yes,
nyama.
ugali nyama choma with kachumbari.
Okay. I don't know how to spell that, but I will listen to the audio and figure it out. I'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, just the same way I'm pronouncing, as I said, Swahili words, just as I'm pronouncing them. Nyama,
Yeah.
choma, kachumbari.
I'm gonna listen to the audio. I'm gonna listen to that. Yeah. Cool.
All
Well,
right.
thank you so much, Kathy, for joining us. And yeah, that is the end of this episode.
And thank you for having me.
As we close today's conversation, we're reminded that Pan-African art music is more than a sound. It is a memory, movement, and meaning. At Akojokwa Music Foundation, we exist to listen, to document, and to support the artists and cultural workers shaping this living tradition. To learn more about our work, our programs, and how you can engage with this growing community, please visit akojokwa.org. Thank you again for listening, and until next time. Akojokwa.